Welcome to the Halloween Podcast, your source for Halloween news, history, ghost stories, and spooky nostalgia. I'm your host, Megan Cunningham.
And I am your other host, Lyle Perez.
Thank you so much for joining us, folks.
Yes, always. It's always a pleasure to have you guys here in the Halloween Podcast, because we really appreciate that you're here. You love Halloween, and we definitely got a doozy for you today. So if you like them spooky feels and that nostalgic feels, this one is for you.
So if you grew up in the 80s and the 90s, chances are you can still remember that feeling. It wasn't Halloween, it wasn't Christmas, and it wasn't the final day of school before summer vacation. And yet somehow it carried a quiet excitement all its own. For many of us, it began with something wonderfully ordinary, a colorful paper flyer. Perhaps your teacher reached into a cardboard box and began passing them down each row of desks. Before everyone had even received one, pages were already turning. Children leaned across aisles to see what their friends had circled. Somebody whispered excitedly, "The book fair's coming." And in that moment, it became much harder to concentrate on long division, spelling tests, or whatever lessons happened to be written on the blackboard. For the rest of the day, your imagination was definitely somewhere else. You studied every page. You folded down corners. You circled possibilities. You mentally added up prices, trying to work out whether your few precious dollars might stretch to 2 books instead of 1. Some children carried the flyer home as carefully as if it were a treasure map. Others couldn't wait that long, reading it beneath their desks whenever the teacher wasn't looking. However you remember it, the anticipation was real. The book fair hadn't even arrived yet, and already it had captured your imagination. Looking back now, it's remarkable that something so simple could leave such an enduring impression. After all, it was only a temporary bookshop. It appeared for a few days, children browsed, books were purchased, and then it disappeared until the following year. But memory has a curious way of preserving moments that seemed ordinary at the time. Ask someone who grew up during those decades about the Scholastic Book Fair, and you'll often hear remarkably similar stories. They remember the excitement of the flyer, they remember counting their money, debating impossible choices, and then they almost always remember the feeling that something special was about to happen. That shared nostalgia is no accident. The Scholastic Book Fair became a fixture of childhood for millions of students, particularly from the 1980s onwards. Although Scholastic itself had been publishing children's books and educational materials since the early 20th century, the company entered the in-school book fair business in 1981, when it acquired a California-based school book fair operation. Over the years that followed, those traveling bookshops became a familiar sight in schools across the United States and eventually in many other parts of the world. The idea was deceptively simple. Transform part of a school into a temporary bookstore, fill it with books that children actually wanted to read, allow them to browse at their own pace, and through the proceeds, help schools acquire additional books and educational resources for their classrooms and libraries. It was a model that benefited everyone. Schools received resources they may not otherwise have been able to afford, publishers connected directly with young readers, and parents had an opportunity to encourage reading. And children experienced something that felt surprisingly rare within the school day: choice. For a few days each year, that library, cafeteria, gymnasium, or multi-purpose room was transformed into a place of discovery rather than instruction. The books weren't arranged according to reading assignments. There were no worksheets waiting at the end. There was no pop quiz. Nobody would ask you to explain the symbolism or identify the central theme. You were simply invited to look around, to browse, to wonder, and discover. Of course, every school was a little different. Some held their book fair in the library, surrounded by familiar shelves. Others transformed the cafeteria after lunch tables had been folded away. Some used the gymnasium, while smaller schools found whatever space they could. The location changed, but the experience rarely did. Some schools held one fair a year, some schools held two a year in fall and spring. But there was always a sense that the room itself had become something else, somewhere between a bookshop and a treasure hunt and an adventure waiting to happen. For many children, the book fair represented one of the first times they could wander among shelves of books with no expectation beyond finding something that genuinely interested them. And that made it feel different from almost everything else at school. You weren't choosing an assignment, you were choosing an adventure. At that time, few of us stopped to think about why that mattered. We were too busy deciding whether to spend our money on dinosaurs, mysteries, joke books, science experiments, or sports heroes, or the newest novel everybody seemed to be talking about. Those decisions felt enormous. Not because the books were expensive, but because you usually couldn't take them all home. You had to make a choice. And looking back now, that may have been one of the book fair's greatest gifts. It quietly taught us as children that reading wasn't simply something that teachers assigned. It could be something that you pursued because your own curiosity led you there. But for many of us, that curiosity was about to lead somewhere unexpected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Lyle, do you have any memories about when the book fair came to town?
I do. I remember a lot of stuff from the book fair. Mostly I remember just getting the pamphlets and then they would mail it to you, or you would go and you would pick it up at your main class. That's where they would be. And then when they'd get there, the teacher would be like, "Hey, come pick up your books." And then everyone would get so excited. But the actual book fair, I do remember it. It would happen in the cafeteria. There was my elementary school cafeteria I used to go to all of elementary. So if anybody knows, in Vista, California, it's no longer there. It is has been moved to where the middle school was. My middle school and my elementary school were right next to each other. So I would go to elementary school, and when I was done there, Washington Middle School was right next to it. So I would just go right there. But now both schools have like merged. Now it's just one big school.
Oh, wow.
And the old building that was Olive Elementary is now, I guess, like an adult school or something like that. But every time I go back to Vista, to California, I want to go there and I want to like go inside the buildings and look around. But I'm always afraid that someone's going to be like, "What the heck are you doing here?"
Yeah, you can't do that anymore these days. Once upon a time you could.
Yeah.
You can't visit your old school so easily anymore.
I remember the whole layout of that school. It's ingrained in my head. I remember where the cafeteria was, right at the entrance. You go right in to your right-hand side. That's the cafeteria. But when you go in the cafeteria, the younger kids would eat inside the cafeteria, in the cafeteria room, and the bigger kids will eat outside next to it. But the book fair always happened when you walk in the main door on your left-hand side. There was like this little section, and that's where it always was. And I loved it. It was great. Oh. It was so much fun.
They're just the best.
Yeah.
I remember it most in middle school. It took place in our library in middle school.
I don't remember
it. Cordoned off a section of our library to do it.
I don't remember it in middle school at all. I only remember it in elementary school. I don't even know if it really happened in middle school.
Yeah, we had it in both. We had it in our elementary school and in our middle school. I believe, if I remember correctly, the elementary one actually took place in the front entryway. So our school had kind of a front hallway that you would walk into that wasn't really used for anything except walking up and down it. Yeah. So I believe the Scholastic Book Fair was set up on one side of that hallway because it was quite a wide space.
Right.
But that may be, like, I was so little and so young, I may be misremembering the location.
Mm-hmm.
But weirdly, I do remember the wheeled-in, like, temporary bookshelves that they had.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were these big gray, like, they must have been there forever, big gray things on casters that they would roll in from wherever they stored them before that and put all the books on them. It was fantastic. And they had a great sort of screech when you moved them across the floor.
Yeah.
But so when the book fair...
Nowadays, my kids, when they have their book fairs, because obviously I have elementary school kids where I have one left. You're almost there, Megan, so you're about to experience a whole new wave of Scholastic Book Fair for you.
Cool.
But theirs is taking place inside the library. and
Yes.
they put shelves in front of the library bookshelf, so you can't really get to the library books. But every time my kids have like some award or something like that, it always takes place in the library. And for whatever reason, I just wander in there. I'll look around at all of the books that are there, trying to find where the Halloween books are, where the scary section is, and it's always still there. It's always still a theme with elementary school kids is that they all love the scary books, and there's always a section for them. There's always one.
So when the book fair finally arrived, of course, anticipation gave way to action. Classes took turns visiting throughout the day, and suddenly the room was filled with children moving from shelf to shelf. Books already tucked beneath their arms as they searched for one more title before it was time to return to class. Friends compared discoveries, debated which books looked the most interesting, and occasionally tried to persuade one another to buy the same thing so they could read it together. Nobody seemed to browse in quite the same way. Some children headed straight for the newest installment of favorite series. Others wandered without any real plan, picking up whatever happened to catch their attention. A striking cover might be enough to stop you in your tracks, or a title could spark your curiosity. Sometimes you only needed to read the first paragraph of the back cover before deciding you had to know what happened next. The hardest part was often deciding what to leave behind. Very few of us had enough money to buy everything we wanted, so every choice came with another book that had to go back on the shelf. More than that, you probably walked around carrying a growing pile of possibilities before reluctantly returning one after another until only your final choice remained. Unlike most of your reading at school, no one told us what to choose, and there were no assigned novels, no reading groups, and no book reports. So for a few precious minutes, the decisions belonged entirely to us. Whether we came looking for dinosaurs or sports books or mysteries, it was something that we couldn't quite explain. We just felt free to follow our own curiosity wherever it happened to lead. Most of the displays were bright and colorful and filled with every kind of adventure imaginable. The variety was part of the excitement. But somewhere among those displays was another shelf. It didn't announce itself. It didn't need to. The colors were darker. The illustrations were stranger. Old houses replaced tree houses. Twisted woods replaced sunny fields. Graveyards, ravens, ghosts, scarecrows, and mysterious doorways began appearing on the covers. Without ever saying so directly, those books seemed to promise that something unusual was waiting inside. Whether you walked straight toward them or found them almost by accident, they had a way of holding your attention just a little longer than the others. And for many of us, that's where the real adventure began. Looking back now, what made the spooky shelf so memorable wasn't simply that it was filled with scary books. It was that those books offered so many different ways to be scared. Standing side by side were gothic mysteries, humorous supernatural adventures, emotionally powerful ghost stories, collections of traditional folklore, suspense novels for older readers, and eventually, some of the best-known children's horror series of the late 20th century. They came from different authors, different publishers, and different storytelling traditions, and yet, together, they revealed that children's horror was never one thing. It was an entire landscape waiting to be explored. For those of us who already counted down the days to Halloween, and I know you're here with me on this, Lyle, the shelf offered something even more exciting.
Oh, yeah.
It suggested that the season didn't have to end when the last jack-o'-lantern was carried to the curb. Haunted houses, ghosts, monsters, old legends, and strange mysteries could be revisited all year, one paperback at a time. And for children who found themselves drawn back to that corner of the book fair, one spooky paperback often led to another, and before long, haunted houses gave way to ghost stories led to folklore led to modern horror, and a casual browse through the book fair became the beginning of a lifelong fascination with the strange and unexplained. The books were all waiting right there for us. All we had to do was choose one. You're right, like the spooky section was the best section.
It was. It had to have been. Well, for us at least.
For us at least, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was always the first place I sort of looked for. I was never in there looking for the Babysitter's Club or anything like that.
Right.
or Pony Club or any of those other books that were there. I wanted something spooky. I wanted something exciting. Give me all that stuff all day long. Even as a child, I was like, yes, this is what I want to see. And definitely during the fall book fairs, they also had specifically Halloween themed books in addition to the scary books, which was always fun. So that was my favorite book fair for that reason. When you got around to the spring book fair, the spooky books were still there, but the Halloween books were not.
Right.
So yeah, always begged for a teeny bit of extra money for the Halloween books at the fall book fair. Always.
I remember it mostly like in the magazines that we used to get. I would always look for the spooky ones in the magazine. Because we got the magazine more than we actually got the fair. Like, I think we only had the fair maybe once a year. I don't think we had it twice. I really don't. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was just once. And then we would have the magazines every...
The magazine for the second one.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I think we had the magazines probably like... Because we had tracks in school. So we were on for 2 months and then off for one. On for 2 months, off for one. So I think at every, like, I guess... season or whatever you would call that, we would have
session,
class session, we would have one section, I guess, would be where we had the book fair. Then the next session, when we'd go back to school after the break, it would be like the magazine. And then again for the last section, I'm pretty sure we had 2 months on, 1 month off, and we did it 4 times, maybe, or 3 times. I don't remember. It's been 20 some odd years. Yeah.
And the spooky book. So I can't remember myself, to be honest, because I remember the fairs more.
Yeah.
Do you remember if the flyers had a spooky section, or were they just peppered throughout the flyer?
They were just peppered all over the place. But then when Goosebumps started to become a main thing, Goosebumps like had its own like little bottom page section or something where you can join the Goosebumps Club, which I was definitely a part of back in the, I think it had to have been 5th grade or so. When that was around, because I remember that was around the same time. Right. I was working with my uncle. He had a landscaping business, and he's like, "Hey, you're off break. Why don't you come work with me?" I worked with him. He'd give me $20, and I would use that $20 to pay for my book club for that month, because it was like a monthly thing. And man, my mom was angry. She was angry.
She's like, "Why'd you sign up for this without telling me?"
Yes, because now she has to pay for it when I can't. But it was great. I remember they would come in like this, I don't know, I guess it was like an envelope, but it was like really big, but it was kind of almost like cardboard paper that was sealed on all edges. So when you'd rip it, you'd have to like grab the end and just rip the whole thing open, and then there'd be a treasure trove of Goosebumps stuff in there. Books, postcards.
They had swag too, didn't they?
Yeah, they had postcards, and we even talked to when we talked to the illustrator. I was telling him that there was postcards in there, and I was like, yeah, I remember the postcards, and I remember all of that junk that used to come in, and I don't know what happened to all of it. I really don't.
That must have been so cool. I did not belong to the Goosebumps fan club. I knew about it, but it was not something that I was allowed to join for similar reasons. My parents were like, "You don't need that."
Yeah, it was.
Do something.
I remember it wasn't a steady number. Like, the number would change month to month. And I think after like the 4th one, my mom was like, "Nope, no more." And I was like, okay, that's bad.
Like, when you think about it, $20 a month is nothing to sneeze at. Like, that's a lot over a course of a year, you know?
Yeah. But I think that was
totally worth it, I'm sure. But
the $20 was like the starting price. That's the price to get you in the door. And then,
gotcha.
And then once you, because I think 1 year it was like $49, or not 1 year, one month.
That's
but there was
crazy.
There was a lot of cool
now
stuff.
I know why
there,
my parents said no.
Yeah, but I had the tendency of just doing stuff, and then my mom would be like, "What? Stop! What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, you mean I can't just fill this out and mail it in?"
She's like, "No. I'm reading, Mom."
Yeah, look, she's like,
"It's not educational.
You can't even read." And I'm like, "Well, I know, but I like to look at the covers, and I like to look at I like to look at the words. I don't like to read them."
Yeah,
is what I would tell her.
So there were specific books that kind of drove the spooky section at Scholastic Book Fairs throughout the years. So I'm just gonna take us on a little journey through some of those for a minute here, if that's okay. So the first one that comes to mind is John Bellairs' The House of the Clock and Its Walls. So long before children's horror became synonymous with haunted masks and ventriloquist dummies, John Bellairs had already shown that young readers could appreciate something quieter, and in many ways, far more unsettling. Published in 1973, The House with the Clock and Its Walls follows Louis Barnevelt, an orphan who moves in with his eccentric uncle Jonathan and discovers that an ancient clock hidden somewhere within the walls of the old house may hold the key to an unspeakable evil. What made the novel so important wasn't simply its story, but the kind of story that it chose to tell. Bellairs drew upon the traditions of classic Gothic fiction, filling his books with imposing Victorian houses, ancient magic, forgotten histories, and the creeping sense that the past is never truly gone. Rather than relying on shock or gore, he trusted atmosphere, suspense, and imagination to do the frightening. In doing so, he introduced countless readers to the pleasures of Gothic storytelling, long before many of them would ever encounter writers like Edgar Allan Poe or M.R. James. The mood was strengthened immeasurably by Edward Gorey's distinctive pen and ink illustrations. Already renowned for his beautifully macabre artwork, Gorey's shadow-filled drawings became inseparable from Bellairs' stories, giving young readers a visual taste of Gothic horror that was eerie, elegant, and unlike anything else on the children's shelf. If Bellairs proved that children's horror could be atmospheric and genuinely Gothic, the next book to capture young readers' imaginations would take a very different approach. Instead of an ancient evil lurking inside an old house, it asked an altogether stranger question. What if the family rabbit was a vampire? Which brings us to one of my favorites when I was a small child, Bunnicula. If John Bellairs showed young readers that horror could be atmospheric, Deborah and James Howe proved it could also be delightfully funny. First published in 1979, Bunnicula tells the story of a seemingly ordinary rabbit found abandoned in a movie theater showing Dracula. As vegetables in the Monroe family's kitchen began mysteriously losing all their juice, the family dog Harold and the highly strung cat Chester become convinced that their new pet is in fact a vampire. The novel was unlike almost anything else on the spooky shelf. Instead of asking readers to fear the monster, they invited them to laugh with it. Blending gentle horror with comedy, mystery, and talking animal antics, Bunnicula introduced younger readers to classic Gothic tropes without overwhelming them. References to vampires, garlic, steaks, and Dracula became part of the fun, making traditional horror folklore accessible to children who might not yet have been ready for genuinely frightening stories. Its success launched a long-running series and demonstrated that children's horror didn't have to rely on scares alone. It could be playful, witty, and affectionate, while still introducing readers to the monsters and legends that had haunted literature for generations. But the spooky shelf wasn't only interested in making us laugh. Before long, its ghost would become quieter, sadder, and far more personal. By the early 1980s, children's horror had begun exploring a different kind of fear, one rooted not in monsters, but in secrets, memory, and the lingering echoes of the past. Published in 1983, Betty Wren Wright's The Dollhouse Murders follows 12-year-old Amy Trillar, who discovers that the dolls in an old Victorian dollhouse mysteriously change position each night, gradually revealing the story of a decades-old murder that has never been solved. The novel helped demonstrate that children's horror could be emotionally rich as well as suspenseful. Rather than relying on supernatural spectacle, Wright built her stories around believable children confronting grief, family tensions, disability, loneliness, and unresolved tragedies. The ghostly element served the mystery instead of overshadowing it, creating stories that were unsettling precisely because they felt so grounded in everyday life. The book became one of Wright's best-known novels and remains widely regarded as a classic of children's supernatural fiction. For many readers, it offered their first experience of a ghost story in which the spirit wasn't simply there to frighten. It was there because it still had a story that needed to be heard. It was a theme that another remarkable novel would explore just a few years later, this time through one of the most unforgettable ghosts to ever haunt the spooky shelf. Published in 1986, Mary Downing Hahn's Wait Till Helen Comes follows Molly, a young girl whose blended family moves into a converted church beside an old cemetery where her troubled stepsister Heather begins communicating with the ghost of a lonely girl named Helen. Like Betty Wren Wright, Hahn understood that the most memorable ghost stories weren't simply about frightening apparitions. They were about people. Beneath its supernatural mystery, Wait Till Helen Comes explores grief, jealousy, sibling relationships, guilt, and the difficulties of becoming a family. The ghost is genuinely unsettling, but the emotional stakes are just as compelling as the paranormal ones, giving young readers a story that lingered long after the final page. The novel quickly became one of the defining works of children's ghost fiction, and remains a staple of middle-grade horror nearly 4 decades after its publication. It has introduced generations of readers to the idea that ghosts in literature are not always monsters to be defeated. Sometimes they're tragic figures whose stories demand to be understood. By now, the spooky shelf had shown young readers that horror could be gothic, it could be funny, and it could be deeply emotional. But one book would stand apart from all the rest. Not because of its plot, not even because of its stories, because of the way it looked. For countless children, all it took was opening the book to a random page and suddenly coming face to face with an illustration they could never forget. If there's one book that has become synonymous with the spooky shelf, it is Alvin Schwartz's Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Mm-hmm. First published in 1981, the collection brought together ghost stories, urban legends, supernatural tales, and traditional folklore that Schwartz had spent years researching from books, archives, and oral storytelling traditions. Rather than inventing entirely new stories, he preserved and adapted tales that had frightened and entertained people for generations, making them accessible to new audience of young readers. The book arrived at exactly the right moment. Around campfires, at sleepovers, and during Halloween parties, children had always challenged one another to tell the scariest story they knew. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark captured that tradition in print. The stories were short, memorable, and designed to be shared aloud, ensuring they spread far beyond the pages of the book itself. Many readers can still recite favorites such as The Hook, The Big Toe, or Me Tidoti Walker decades after first encountering them. Yet for countless children, it wasn't the stories they remember first. It was the illustrations. Stephen Gammell's haunting black and white artwork transformed the books into something unforgettable. Created with scratchboard and ink wash techniques, his surreal, decaying figures seemed to exist somewhere between dreams and nightmares. You didn't even have to be reading a story. Simply flipping through the pages could bring you face to face with a pale, hollow-eyed figure, or a grotesque apparition that lodged itself in your imagination for years. Many readers who can't recall a single story can still vividly remember the moment they turned a page and encountered one of Gammell's illustrations for the first time. Those illustrations are also what made the books one of the most frequently challenged children's titles in American schools and libraries during the late 20th century. Parents and community groups often objected to the disturbing artwork, graphic imagery, or frightening subject matter. While librarians and educators defended the books for their literary value, their preservation of folklore, and the enthusiasm they inspired in young readers. The debate would become one of the defining chapters in the history of children's literature. By the early 1990s, however, another author would introduce an entirely new generation to horror. His books were brighter, faster, and impossible to collect just one of. And before long, they seemed to be everywhere. His name was R.L. Stine. When Goosebumps first appeared in 1992, few could have predicted that it would become one of the most successful children's book series in publishing history. Created by R.L. Stine, the series featured ordinary children caught in extraordinary situations. Haunted masks, possessed lawn gnomes, living dummies, cursed cameras, evil sponge creatures, werewolves, and mummies, and countless other supernatural threats. Each book told a self-contained story, making it easy for readers to jump in anywhere while eagerly anticipating the next installment. What set Goosebumps apart was its remarkable accessibility. Stein wrote with a fast pace, short chapters, cliffhanger endings, and just enough suspense to keep readers turning pages without overwhelming them. For countless children, these became the first novels they simply couldn't put down. Teachers and librarians frequently remarked that even reluctant readers were devouring Goosebumps books, often returning to the library or book fair determined to collect the next one in the series. The books were impossible to miss. Tim Jacobus's instantly recognizable cover paintings with their vivid colors, unsettling imagery, and hidden visual jokes were every bit as important to the series' identity as Stein's stories. Long before you picked up a copy, you already knew it was a Goosebumps book. The series became a publishing phenomenon. New titles appeared with remarkable frequency through the 1990s and through Scholastic's enormous distribution network, including book fairs and school book clubs. Goosebumps found its way into classrooms, libraries, and backpacks across North America and beyond. By the end of the decade, the books had sold tens of millions of copies and had become a defining part of childhood for an entire generation. For many readers, the spooky shelf began with Bellairs' Laughter with Bunnicula or Folklore with Alvin Schwartz, but it was Goosebumps that turned children's horror into a cultural phenomenon. As the children who had discovered ghosts and haunted houses and vampire rabbits at the book fair grew older, the spooky shelf grew up with them. Launched by Scholastic in the United Kingdom in 1989 and in the United States in 1991, the Point Horror imprint introduced teenage readers to darker, more suspenseful stories by authors including Christopher Pike, Diana Ho, Richie Tankersley Cusick, Carolyn B. Cooney, and eventually R.L. Stine. These novels traded haunted toys and mischievous monsters for stalkers, psychological suspense, urban legends, and mysteries that reflected the anxieties of adolescence. Point Horror proved that there was a natural progression for young horror fans. Readers who had first discovered spooky fiction through middle-grade novels didn't have to leave the genre behind as they grew older. Instead, they could move naturally into more mature stories that retained the same page-turning suspense while tackling older characters and more complex themes. The imprint became a defining part of teen reading during the late 1980s and 1990s, particularly in Britain, where its distinctive black spines became instantly recognizable in bookshops, libraries, and school bags. It provided an early platform for writers who had become some of the most influential names in the young adult suspense fiction genre. Looking back, that's what made the spooky shelf so remarkable. It wasn't a collection of scary books. It was a pathway. A child might begin with John Bellairs and laugh through Bunnicula, shiver over scary stories to tell in the dark, race through Goosebumps, and eventually find themselves reading Point Horror as teenagers. Without ever realizing it, they had grown up alongside the genre itself. And then, almost as quickly as those books became childhood classics, some adults became asking whether children should be reading them at all. For the children who grew up during the 80s and 90s, the spooky shelf was a place of imagination, excitement, and discovery. It introduced us to gothic mysteries, ghost stories, folklores, monsters, just enough fear to make us want to turn one more page. But not everyone saw those books the same way. As their popularity grew, so did the concerns of some parents and community groups. Books that millions of children treasured were increasingly being questioned, challenged, and in some cases removed from school libraries and classrooms. The very qualities that young readers found so irresistible, the frightening illustrations, supernatural themes, ghosts, monsters, witches, and unsettling stories, were seen by some adults as inappropriate for children. No books came to represent that debate more than Alvin Schwartz's Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark and R.L. Stine's Goosebumps. Together, they became two of the most frequently challenged children's horror series in the United States, helping to spark a wider conversation about fear, childhood, and where adults believed that line should be drawn. The question was no longer whether children loved the books. The question had become, should they be allowed to read them at all? It's easy to look back on these books with nothing but affection for us, and for most of us, they were the highlight of every Scholastic Book Fair. They introduced us to all kinds of themes that we would continue to have a passion for the rest of our lives. But as those concerns from adults became a problem. Their objections weren't simply that the books were spooky. Many believed that frightening stories could cause nightmares, anxiety, or emotional distress in young readers. Others objected to depictions of ghosts, witches, demons, vampires, or the supernatural on religious grounds. Graphic illustrations, references to death, and disturbing imagery also prompted complaints, particularly when parents felt the material was inappropriate for elementary-age children. Those concerns became especially visible during the 1980s and early 1990s, when broader cultural debates were taking place around children's media. In some communities, the wider climate of the Satanic Panic heightened fears about occult influences in entertainment, games, music, literature, bringing increased scrutiny to books featuring ghosts, witches, demons, magic, and other supernatural themes. Children's horror books became part of that much larger conversation alongside horror films, heavy metal music, role-playing games, and even Halloween itself. For most of us, the story ended when we carried our books home from the book fair. For some parents, it was only the beginning. Across the United States, mothers, fathers, pastors, teachers, and community groups began walking into schools and libraries carrying copies of the very books their children had been bringing home. Some asked that the books be moved to a different section. Others wanted access restricted to older students. In some cases, they asked that the books be removed from school shelves altogether. What followed wasn't a wave of nationwide bans, but hundreds of local conversations. School boards, principals, librarians, and review committees weighed complaints, read the books, and decided whether they should remain available. Some challenges were rejected, some resulted in restrictions. A smaller number ended up with books being removed, at least for a time. It was a process that played out differently from one community to the next. Librarians, teachers, and free expression advocates generally saw the issue from a different perspective. They argued that every parent had the right to decide what was appropriate for their own child, but that no single parent could make that decision for every other family. It was a debate that reached far beyond children's horror books, asking questions that libraries and schools continue to wrestle with to this day. Who gets to decide what children are allowed to read? For the spooky shelf, it was definitely Alvin Schwartz and R.L. Stine. I remember that growing up. But long after generations of children had finished reading them beneath their covers with a flashlight, those books are still being argued over at school board meetings and library committees across America. Do you have any memory of challenges to books when you were a kid? I definitely do. I remember people complaining specifically about scary stories to tell in the dark.
I remember there were complaints, but I don't remember how often they were or when they were. I do remember, I don't remember a complaint, but I do remember something that my parents were talking about. This was like, I had to have been in like kindergarten or something like that. I was very, very young. There was, I mean, this is really dumb, but there was a book of the creation story, and in it there was Adam and Eve, and it was like a little cartoon Adam and Eve of them being looking at, you know, everything, looking at Earth basically, looking at the rainforest or whatever they were looking at, and they were naked and you can see their butts, and we thought it was the most hilarious thing in the world.
Of course, yeah.
So it was like one of those things where we'd all just go, we'd find the book, we'd look at it, we'd laugh at the butts, and then we would put it back, and you know, somebody would check it out. And I remember one time I checked it out, and I showed my mom. I was like, "Hey, Mom, look, there's butts," and she was like, "What is that?" And I'm like,
"That is not funny."
I don't know. And then my mom was fine with it because she's like, "Yeah, it's just the creation story. I mean, obviously they're going to be naked. That's
yeah,
you know,
that's the whole
that's
point
it.
of
They
the story.
they have no clothes." But my dad was I don't know, he was on one or whatever. But I remember them arguing about that book, and so needless to say, I just took the book back to the library, and I never checked it out again. But yeah, that was, I mean, just stupid things like that just get people all up in arms.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
It sounds like a Tommy Di Paola book, because he wrote a lot of those biblical stories, and some of his drawings and stuff it sounds like something that he would have written. Just guessing.
I don't remember anything other than just that it was just they were naked and they were there, and it was like page 1 or something like that. And it was, I don't remember what the rest of the book was or anything. I just remember that.
I remember hearing that someone had complained about scary stories to tell in the dark. And I remember my parents too, like as I went through life, sort of debating what was appropriate for me to be reading. Like they would look through the books that I was reading before I would read them a lot of times, and they would kind of go, is this really okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I was an avid reader, and I started reading a lot of books kind of ahead of what they would have in school.
Yeah.
Like I read a lot of Hawthorne and Edgar Allan Poe and stuff like that when I was still in middle school, like before you start reading them in high school as part of the assignments. And I remember, and even like Interview with the Vampire, I remember my parents being like, is this really appropriate? At the age I was reading it at. But they decided in the end that I was clever enough to be able to distinguish reality from fiction.
Yeah.
And they did let me read them, with the appropriate conversations involved as well. Yeah. But yeah, I do remember that being an issue, definitely, around the time that I was growing up. But for all the debates, complaints, and school board meetings, like, that isn't what most of us remember about the book fair. We remember clutching a folded flyer in our classroom desk, circling the books we hoped our parents would let us buy. Like, remember counting our money over and over, trying to convince ourselves that somehow we could afford one more paperback, or maybe even a Halloween-themed eraser or novelty pencil or pen, with whatever change we had left, because they, of course, also had those cool little accessories that you could buy at the book fair, too.
Mm-hmm.
And we remember walking into the library or gymnasium and making a beeline for that shelf that promised ghosts, haunted houses, monsters, and mysteries. Yeah. And if we're honest, we probably judged at least half of those books by their covers. Like before ever picking them up and reading them, you're like, that looks cool. I'm reading that.
Yeah.
And long
they say not to
do
that. But
I disagree.
I completely disagree. It's got to have a cool cover. Yes. But even though,
illustrations are important.
There may be some books out there that have just basic covers that are great, and nothing against that. But as a kid, it's got to have a good cover. It really does.
Yeah. Long before social media recommendations or online reviews were a thing, those covers did the talking.
Mm-hmm.
Like Edward's gory, shadowy hallways hinted at secrets that were hidden just out of sight, and Stephen Gammell's impossible nightmare figures seemed to stare back at you from the page.
Yeah.
Tim Jacobus's brilliantly colored monsters practically leapt off the book fair table at you. And together they invited us to take a chance on a story we knew almost nothing about. And for many of us, that chance changed everything. The Spooky Shelf wasn't simply where we discovered a favorite author, it was where we first encountered folklore, gothic fiction, urban legends, and the delicious thrill of being frightened by a story we knew wasn't real, but somehow still felt real when the lights went out. It showed us that fear could be entertaining, that mystery could spark imagination, and that the books we remembered longest were often the ones that left us glancing over our shoulder on the way to bed. Today's Scholastic Book Fairs look different from the ones that many of us grew up with. The titles have changed, and a new generation have found their own spooky favorites. But the feeling remains remarkably familiar. Somewhere in a school library or a gymnasium, a child is probably wandering past a display of books, stopping in front of one with a particularly eerie cover, and wondering whether they're brave enough to actually open it. They don't know it yet, but they may be about to discover a story that they'll still remember 40 years from now. And perhaps that's the real magic of the Spooky Shelf. It was never just about being scared. It was about discovering that stories have a way of staying with us. That a ghost, a haunted house, or a strange old legend can take up residence in our imagination long after we've closed the cover. And maybe that's why, all these years later, we can still remember exactly how it felt to walk into that book fair, spot the bookshelf across the room, and wonder what was waiting for us inside those pages. Some stories end when you close the book, but the best ones never really do.
No, they don't.
I'm a
they stay
firm
with
believer in that.
Yeah.
They do. They absolutely do.
Yeah, but one thing that I often think about is, these things stay with us, but we have a way of expressing that with podcasting, with YouTube, with all of these social media things. We have a way of sharing that with somebody. I mean, that's one of the main reasons why people collect stuff is you want to share it with somebody. I collect all of these dumb Halloween things, but I have nobody to share it with personally. But I have I have you now that I can be like, hey, check this out. And you can,
behind
you can see all this stuff. But without podcasting, without YouTube, without any of that, would we still hold on to these things if we had no way of expressing them? You know what I mean?
I think we would.
You think so?
I know I would. Yeah, and maybe that's just because I'm a hoarder at heart.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But if you had no way of showing it to anybody, if social media wasn't a thing, there was no social media, we would just go on our daily lives like in the 90s, and the only time you really had to express it or to show it would be during school. But once school's over, like, who would you really have other than like the neighborhood kids? And that's it.
Like, in fairness, I have a bunch of really cool stuff, and I've been telling you about my box. I will show everyone the things from my box at some point.
Yeah.
But I've had it for years, and I've never, I don't post it on social media. I don't really, when someone comes to visit, I don't whip out my Halloween box and be like, look at this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I still love it, and it still brings me immense joy to be able to go through it myself. So I probably would keep it. And again, that's probably because I'm just a little bit of a hoarder. But yeah, but I love being able to, I think that was my interview for the podcast where I got on and we talked, and I was like, oh my gosh, in the background, that's that. And that's that. And it became kind of a show and tell session. And I'm pretty sure that's how you're like, yeah, okay, we're on the same page.
Yeah, we're on the same page. That was a big thing with trying to find a co-host, is I needed somebody that I can nerd out with all of this stuff that I remember too. So yeah, that was definitely a big thing. But yeah, I often think about those things where how life would be different if we didn't have this, or if we didn't have that
podcast.
Yeah, how things would emerge. I think about it with certain things, like things get what do they call it, immortalized. One thing that I think about a lot is the terrible tragedy that happened in the 50s where Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, the Big Bopper, where they died.
Oh, yeah. The day the music died.
One thing that I think about is if the movie that made it a real big spectacle in the 80s, which was, well, not spectacle, but something that really brought it to people's attention, like La Bamba. If that movie had never existed, would that tragedy still be as in our minds as it is now? Because I think there had to have been a period from the 60s to when that movie was done where people were not thinking about that at all. Nobody was walking around going, hey, do you remember the day the music died? And then they talk about it. I don't think that was really going on until that movie came out and it became immortalized in something that people can go back and revisit and watch it over and over. They enjoyed it. But I think about that with people that have passed, and then they do if they pass tragically and they do a movie about them, like Selena, for example. Would Selena still be as big and relevant now if the 95, 96 movie came out? If that movie had never have come out, would she still be immortalized the way she is now? Because they did, I think there's another show out there of
I
the
think
Selena
they are
story.
coming out with some kind of a reboot thing. But I also think the real question there is, would all of these people, because every single person we've just mentioned there died tragically and before their time.
Before their time, right.
And you often hear about young musicians and stuff who all die around a certain age. You've got Janis Joplin and Mama Cass and Jimi Hendrix, all of them. They're immortalized now because of that tragedy. And they were not taking away from their talent or their artistry at all. They were genuinely extremely talented people, like Amy Winehouse, all these people. It continues into modern day. All very talented artists. But had their careers continued on the same way that their contemporaries' careers did, who have all more or less petered out, would they still be talked about the same way that they are now as these legends? or are they legends because they're frozen in time because they died at the height of their popularity as young people? So I think it's the death rather than like the rehashings that make everybody, like the death caused the rehashings rather than the rehashings being the reason that we remember it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But as time goes on and it no longer becomes as relevant, like the day the music died happened in the 50s, and they didn't have podcasting. They didn't have a way to express themselves during that period. So it took media, it took something to make it to where people can start expressing themselves about it again.
True.
That brought that back into light. And then that's how we do it. So if podcasting or social media or things like that were not here, would we still have those
conversations?
Yeah, would we still have that feeling towards it that we really loved? Like that's
a good point.
That's kind of what I think. So I don't know. What do our listeners think? I'd love to.
Yeah, we want to. This is a deep question. We want to hear your thoughts.
This is literally the stuff that keeps me up at night. Literally, it's just thinking about these stupid things.
Just briefly, speaking of keeping things going and keeping the feelings going, I wanted to show you a couple cool things. These came from my box.
Oh, wow.
Little Halloween pencils.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that they specifically came from the Scholastic Book Fair, but they're definitely from that period.
Right.
So I've got a little, some ghosts, some bats and witchy owls, and some pumpkins. But I wanted to give a special shout out because I did some shopping. And the Spook Show Babe Designs, who we mentioned back on our favorite, my top 5 handmade things on Etsy, released these, which are so cool. It's a notepad, bookmark, and a pen set. Well, the bookmark is sold separately, but the pen and the notepad come together, and they are all Halloween Spook Club Scholastic Book Fair themed.
Nice.
So the pad actually looks like the Scholastic Book Fair form that you would fill out with the quantity, title, and cost, and sort of your name down the bottom. It's amazing. The actual, oh my god, bookmark. Sorry, I had a brain moment there. Has titles actually on it from when we were kids.
Yeah, and
some of my favorites are on here. Like it's absolutely amazing. This could be my Scholastic Book Fair list if I had $1 million. Because never ever was every line filled. And the pen's pretty cool too. It has the same theme, and it just says Scholastic Book Fair, Halloween Spook Club, and it's got some cool skeletons with pumpkin heads and bats. I love it. She has a whole like 1990s. It reminds me of kind of spooky Lisa Frank. And when she sent them to me, she even sent them to me with some little tiny erasers, just like you used to be able to buy at the Scholastic Book Fair.
Yeah.
So psyched. So nostalgia feelings washing over me.
Yes.
And it arrived literally the day before yesterday, just as I was writing this episode. So I was so excited. Yeah. So thank you to Crystal Cox from Spook Show Babe for giving me extra nostalgia and all the feels when I was crafting this episode.
Yeah. And again, that goes to show if social media wasn't here, if the internet wasn't here, would we have still had that nostalgic feeling? I don't think you would have.
Exactly.
Unless it was here. So
that's why I brought it up. I was like, there we go. That is Lyle's point summed up in a nice, neat little bow.
Yeah. We love nostalgia only probably because we have a way of expressing it. Mm-hmm. Believe me if I'm wrong, or tell me that I'm wrong.
I think you're right.
But I honestly think that's why nostalgia is so big right now. And I've always thought about that, why people love nostalgia, why nostalgia is always such a big thing. But then again, I also have a thought where, like, when Happy Days came out, they came out, what, in the 70s? But it was a show about the 50s. So, again, it was the advancement of something that made it to where, hey, I'm feeling nostalgic about the 50s. I have no way of expressing it. But now the show came out that is nothing but the 50s that I can definitely watch and express myself through it. So, yeah, that's just...
Well, that's human nature, isn't it? Like, to look back. And they always say that if you're someone who collects with the intent to sell, you're supposed to start selling between, like, I think it's 35 and 45 years is the sweet spot after the item first came out, because that's when the people who will have remembered it as children now have the budget to buy it.
Right.
And are at that like peak nostalgia level where they're looking for things from their childhood.
Right.
So yeah, they're like, if you miss that window, the value goes way, way down for a lot of things. Not everything, but for a lot of things.
Yeah, but then another...
that generation is past it. They're now on a fixed income and they're collecting their retirement money.
And that's another point too, that kind of goes with that, is nostalgia is kind of like a funny thing. We love it so much because we grew up in a world where we couldn't express ourselves. Now, kids do have a way to express themselves through YouTube, through all of those things. So I don't really feel like kids 30 years from now would be nostalgic over things that are happening now, because they've already had a way of expressing themselves. My daughters, I don't see my daughter Kalexi. She doesn't collect anything. She has zero interest in almost anything that is, of her age. The only thing she likes is to just watch YouTube, watch Roblox.
Yeah.
Maybe if Roblox isn't around 30 years from now, she might be like, wow, I remember Roblox from when I was a kid. But I don't see it going away ever. Like, I think kids would just continuously keep playing that game over and over and over again. So will they still be nostalgic over stuff? I don't see much of anything about them getting nostalgic over.
I bet they will be nostalgic for creators or
YouTubers,
podcasts
maybe,
or shows that they used to regularly watch that are no longer available in terms of new episodes coming out because the hosts have retired or passed away or whatever. They'll still be able to have easier access to them probably because they'll be able to get them somewhere in the internet. Whereas we're collecting maybe, hard copy items.
Yeah, because we grew up in that hard copy item. We grew up like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's, just, I don't know.
But that's what makes us special.
Yeah, I guess that's what makes our generation so loved, is that we grew up in both. We grew up right when we needed to have.
There was no internet. Item. There was no cell phones.
Once you missed it on TV, you missed it. You just
it was gone.
It was gone. Unless you had it on VHS, like I definitely did.
Yeah, but to get that on VHS, you often had to have a recorder, a VHS that was capable of recording, so that you could put in the blank tape or the tape with something on it that you didn't mind recording over.
Yeah.
And you had to actually sit there, wait for it to start, and press record.
Yeah.
Or sometimes you would have like a tape that had multiple things on it, and you'd press record and then pray that there was still enough space on the tape to get to the end of whatever it was you were recording, because you didn't actually want to erase the stuff that came before it.
Right.
And sometimes, like, if you're really fancy, like my mom used to try and cut out commercials for us and stuff.
Yeah.
With like varying success. But we still had, we don't have them anymore, but we still had some of those old VHS tapes that my mom had recorded for us when we were kids up until very recently.
Yeah. But that's another thing right there, is that back then we hated commercials. We wanted to get them off the VHS, but now I would sit there and I would watch all of these old commercials.
The old commercials, yes.
And that gives me a lot of nostalgic feel, but for whatever reason at the time we hated them. And that's kind of how it is still now.
It interrupts your show, like my son he's only 2.5, but if you're watching Disney or something and the commercial break comes, he's like, pause it, because he thinks pause it means like get rid of it. It's like, pause it. But and I don't blame him. It interrupts the flow. Yeah.
I think it's also too, it's just the time that we miss that is gone. Like for us, the Scholastic Book Fairs that we knew are gone. They are no longer, sure. They will never be the same. Like when I went to the kids one, it's just not the same. It's not. And it never will be ever again. And that's kind of what we miss. That's kind of why we want to bring them back up again and talk about them, because that's how we express ourselves.
But I think it's also a chance to, like, storytelling and telling about the past and things are always a chance to share with younger generations who couldn't experience it, some of that enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And I do recall, like, when I was a kid, my grandparents telling me different stories or my parents telling me different stories. about things from their childhood, and I became nearly as attached to those stories as they were themselves.
Yeah.
So you can pass on a feeling that comes with nostalgia, even if it's not the actual, like, you can't transfer your memories into someone else's head, but you can make them appreciate and understand your love of something, your nostalgic love of something, to the point where the nostalgia feeling passes on to at least some degree, which is lovely.
Yeah, but it's also easier and better to talk to somebody who experienced it as well.
Of course, yeah. It's more fun to talk to somebody who was there.
That's basically what we're doing now, is that. Yeah. We're just sharing our own experiences with somebody who also experienced it, but they experienced it differently.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, everyone does.
Yeah.
Naturally, yep.
But, I guess that's our discussion.
That is a wrap.
On the Scholastic Book Fair, which...
so please tell us your memories. Share your favorite books with us.
Yeah, leave us some comments.
It twice a year, once a year? Yeah. Leave us some comments. Call the hotline. Yeah. Please, we want to hear your thoughts and experiences for sure.
Yes, don't forget to call that hotline, because if you want more content from the Halloween podcast, we need your help, because there's only so much talking heads that me and Megan can really do. So we need that extra content. So if you want to share a story, share a personal paranormal experience, or even if you just want to ask us a question, you want to get our thoughts on anything, preferably Halloween related. I don't know.
Preferably Halloween related.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to get into like any medical talk or anything like that. So don't tell us about the bunions you got. We're not. Like I tell everyone in real estate, I'm just a real estate agent. I'm not a surveyor. I am not a home inspector. I'm not an electrician. So if you have any of those questions, direct them to
one of them.
Those. But if you have any questions about buying this house, then you talk to me. So if you have any Halloween questions, then you talk to me.
Yes. Yep. And the hotline, for those of you who may not remember it, is 731-400-0472.
Yes.
And again, it's just an answering machine. Yeah. You don't have to talk to anyone. No one's going to grill you about what you're calling about. Just call, leave a message. If you want credit for it, be sure to leave your name and where you are from. It doesn't have to be the precise Google Maps location, but just, the general area is fine, so that we can give you credit.
Yeah. And if you mess up, don't feel bad. Just say, I messed up, guys. I'll call you right back. And then just call again, and we won't use the messed up one.
Yeah, we'll use the good version.
Yes. So we'll use we'll definitely take care of you. You're fine. But other than that, if you guys have any questions, comments, or want to suggest anything for a future show, then just call the hotline, let us know there, or send us an email the old-fashioned way, or send us a letter if you want to do it the really old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
Which we don't really have a mailing address yet, so maybe one day we'll get one.
We should get a PO box or something.
Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, send us an email, info@thehalloweenpodcast.com. Check out the website, thehalloweenpodcast.com, and like us on our socials, facebook.com/thehalloweenpodcast, instagram.com/thehalloweenpodcast. And if you'd like to join the pumpkin room, as we like to say, then go on our Patreon page, patreon.com/thehalloweenpod, and show us some support. With just $10 every month, you get access to all of these cool shows. Hi, how you doing? And you get to see us. So go to patreon.com/thehalloweenpod and check us out there. Megan, did I forget anything? I think that's it.
Nope, I think that's everything.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you guys so much, and we will see you again very soon for a nice mini-sode that we got for you guys. So we'll see you then. You guys have a good night.
Have a good night.